I always felt a flicker of relief when I poured my heart out to Samantha. I'd start with a shaky voice, afraid to say too much, but she never rushed me. She just listened, really listened, with those soft eyes that made me feel like I was safe. I'd tell her everything, every crack in my marriage, every night I waited for Jake to come home. Samantha would lean in closer, offering kind words and warm tea that felt like a balm on my soul. In those moments, I thought I'd found my lifeline, a friend who would never let me drown. But there was something almost too perfect in the way she responded, like she already knew how my story would end. Her smile was always a little too reassuring, her hugs just a little too tight. Sometimes I caught a glint in her eyes I couldn't name, a flicker of something I didn't want to see. I told myself it was just my imagination, that Samantha's loyalty was solid as a rock. So I kept confiding in her, night after night, giving away my fears like fragile pieces of myself, and she always caught them, holding them in her soft hands. I didn't realize I was handing her the blueprint to my heartbreak. I thought I was finding comfort, but really, I was giving Samantha everything she needed to step into my life. She was there through it all, every fight with Jake, every tear I swallowed down. She'd whisper that I deserved better, that I was stronger than I knew. And I clung to those words like they were the only thing keeping me from shattering completely. There were nights when I'd come to her with nothing left in me but questions. "Am I not enough?" I'd ask, and she'd shake her head fiercely, telling me I was more than enough. She'd brush a strand of hair behind my ear, her touch so gentle, and promise that Jake was the one who couldn't see what he had. In those moments, her words were the only anchor I had. I leaned into her comfort because it was the only thing that made the pain feel a little less sharp. She was the one person who made me feel like I wasn't alone in my silent heartbreak. Samantha's apartment became my sanctuary, a place where I could let down the mask and just be. The scent of fresh coffee and her soothing voice wrapped around me like a warm blanket. We'd sit together on her couch, our legs folded beneath us, as she asked the questions no one else dared to ask. "Do you still love him?" she'd say softly, and I'd nod, even when my heart felt like it was splintering in my chest. I thought she was helping me hold the pieces together, but something in her gaze told me she was already imagining a life of her own. It was strange how she never seemed surprised by the things I shared. Every new fear, every confession, she met them all with a calm that both comforted and unsettled me. Sometimes I wondered how she stayed so steady, how she never flinched at the worst parts of my marriage. But I never pressed. I was too tired to question, too grateful to see anything beyond the comfort she gave me. In her arms, the world felt softer, even if deep down, something was already breaking apart. One night, after I'd poured out every last ache in my heart, Samantha took my hand and held it in hers, her thumb tracing slow circles over my skin. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with something I couldn't quite name. "You deserve to be loved the way you give love, Emily," she told me. Those words felt like both a balm and a warning, something I clung to, even if it didn't sit right in my gut. I told myself it was just her way of comforting me, of reminding me not to settle for less. I never imagined that the woman who held my tears so carefully was weaving her own plans in the shadows. I thought I was safe with her, that I could lean on her without fear. I wanted so badly to believe she was the only one in my corner, the only one who truly saw me. But even then, there were moments when a chill would run down my spine, unbidden. Moments when I'd catch her watching me just a little too closely, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. I'd shake it off, telling myself she was just worried, just protective. As I look back now, I see those moments for what they were, the first threads of betrayal, woven so carefully I didn't notice until it was too late. But at the time, all I felt was gratitude. I thought Samantha was the friend I needed most, the one who would help me stand tall again. I didn't know she was already tying the noose that would leave me gasping for air. At first, I didn't see the signs for what they were. It started with the smallest things. A text Samantha quickly hid when I walked in, a flash of guilt that vanished behind her smile. I'd find a faint scent on Jake's shirt, something floral and soft that wasn't mine. My gut would tighten, but I told myself it was nothing. Samantha was my friend, and Jake was my husband, the two people I trusted most. I didn't want to believe they could be anything but that. But the doubts started to bloom like cracks in the walls I'd built around my heart. I'd catch Samantha looking at Jake when she thought I wasn't watching, her gaze lingering a beat too long. I'd hear whispers in my head, telling me not to trust what I thought I knew. I'd push them away, clinging to the belief that I was just being paranoid. After all, Samantha had been there for every heartbreak, every tear. She was the one who told me I deserved more. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath me was shifting. I'd lie awake at night, replaying every look, every laugh that didn't feel quite right. I'd remember how Samantha would squeeze my hand when I talked about Jake, how her eyes would flicker with something I didn't understand. I wanted so badly to believe she was on my side, that she was my anchor, not the weight pulling me under. But deep down, I knew the truth was trying to claw its way out. The more I tried to ignore the whispers of doubt, the louder they became. I started to notice the way Samantha's laughter would trail off when I mentioned how late Jake was coming home. She'd brush it off, saying he must be working hard, but her tone felt forced. I'd catch her watching me with that same too steady calm, as if she was waiting for me to figure it out on my own. I told myself I was imagining it, that she was just being the friend she'd always been, but it was getting harder to believe. One afternoon, I found a receipt in Jake's coat pocket, a dinner for two at a place I'd never been. My hands shook as I read it, the date circled in bright red ink. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. Samantha's knowing smile, Jake's evasive eyes, they were all part of the same picture. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into a truth I didn't want to see. The scent on his clothes, the texts Samantha quickly hid, they were no longer just coincidences. They were clues, scattered like breadcrumbs, leading me to a place I wasn't sure I was ready to go. I felt sick with the weight of what I was beginning to understand. But even then, I held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. That the people I loved most couldn't be the ones tearing my heart to shreds. I started watching them closer after that, my eyes trained on every word, every glance they shared. It was like I was living in two worlds at once, the one where Samantha was my rock and the one where she was the one chipping away at my heart. I'd catch Jake's eyes darting to her when he thought I wasn't looking, and each time, it felt like a crack splintering deeper inside me. I tried to confront the feeling, to name it, but every time I opened my mouth, the words died on my tongue. I was too afraid of what might spill out if I let them. Even the smallest things took on new weight. A laugh that didn't feel quite right, a silence that stretched just a little too long. I'd replay those moments over and over in my mind, trying to convince myself they meant nothing. But the truth was, I was starting to see it. That Samantha wasn't just holding my secrets, she was using them. I didn't want to admit it, didn't want to believe that the friend I trusted most was the one feeding the shadows in my mind. But the more I looked, the more I saw. And once you start to see, you can't unsee. I felt the pieces click together like a lock turning, the shape of a betrayal I hadn't wanted to name. The puzzle was finally coming into focus, and I knew that the only way forward was to stop pretending I didn't see the picture in front of me. One night, I borrowed Samantha's phone to call Jake. My battery had died, and she didn't even hesitate, handing it over with that same calm smile. My fingers shook as I unlocked the screen, my heart thudding like it already knew what I was about to find. I wasn't looking for anything, not really. I just needed to hear his voice, to pretend for a moment that everything was okay. But there they were, bright and damning, like an earthquake cracking the ground beneath my feet. The messages were casual at first, jokes and memories that should have been mine. But then I saw them for what they were, flirty, intimate, mocking. Words that should have been whispered in the dark of our bedroom, shared only between husband and wife. My throat closed around a scream that wouldn't come out. My hands went cold, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of tiny betrayals, each word another weight pulling me under. Samantha's phone, warm in my hand, was suddenly the coldest thing I'd ever held. I looked up at her, my eyes wide and my chest tight with something I didn't have a name for. She just watched me, her lips parting like she was about to say something. But she didn't. She didn't have to. The truth was right there on the screen, as plain as day. I saw every late night, every laugh they shared behind my back. My best friend, my husband, they were no longer separate people in my life. They were one betrayal, and it was staring me straight in the face. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my own heart breaking. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, each one a dagger that cut deeper than the last. Samantha's voice, the one that had always comforted me, was now the echo of every lie I'd believed. And Jake. His words were soft and tender, words I hadn't heard in so long, but they weren't meant for me. They were for her, the woman I thought was my safe place. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room and shatter everything in front of me. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the screen, my eyes burning with tears that refused to fall. In that moment, I realized that Samantha hadn't just stolen my husband. She'd stolen every moment of comfort I'd ever felt in her presence. She'd been the hand that held me up, only to be the one to push me down. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. I sat there in the silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on my shoulders. Every whispered word, every comforting hug. It was all a lie. I thought of the nights I'd spent crying in her arms, the nights she'd looked me in the eye and told me everything would be okay. My heart felt like it was splintering into 1,000 tiny pieces, and I didn't know if I could ever put them back together. I didn't know how to breathe in a world where Samantha wasn't my friend. She was the enemy I never saw coming. As I held the phone in my shaking hands, I felt the weight of every choice I'd made, every secret I'd trusted her with, every tear I'd let her wipe away. It all felt like a trap I'd walked into blind. The words on that screen didn't just shatter my trust. They shattered the story I'd built around Samantha, the safe harbor I thought I'd found in her embrace. My head was spinning, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was right there, undeniable. Samantha didn't even try to take the phone back. She just stood there, her expression calm in a way that made my skin crawl. There was no apology in her eyes, no shame, only a quiet triumph that twisted my gut. In that moment, I realized I was done pretending. I wouldn't be the girl who turned a blind eye, the woman who let her pain stay hidden. My heart was broken, but I could feel something else rising in its place, something fierce and unyielding. I looked at her and felt the first flicker of a strength I didn't know I had. My voice was low, but it didn't shake as I spoke. "You were never my friend," I said, each word sharp and deliberate. The taste of those words in my mouth was bitter and freeing all at once. And though I was still raw, still reeling, I knew this was just the beginning of what needed to be said. There was no going back, no way to unsee the truth. I was ready to face it, no matter how much it hurt. I invited Samantha over the next day, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted her to see my face, to hear the truth in my voice, and to know I wasn't the same woman she thought she could fool. When she walked in, she looked at me with that practiced smile, her eyes scanning mine for any sign of weakness. But I didn't flinch. I was done letting her read me like an open book. I had nothing left to hide. I offered her a seat, my voice calm as I asked if she wanted some tea. My hands moved on autopilot, but inside, every word, every gesture was deliberate. I wanted her to feel the weight of what I knew, the gravity of the betrayal that had ripped my world apart. She tried to play the same game, to be the caring friend who'd always known what to say. But I wasn't falling for it this time. I was done letting her rewrite my story with soft lies and sweet smiles. When she finally sat down, I pulled out the phone and laid it on the table between us. I watched her eyes flicker as she saw the messages, that moment of flickering fear she couldn't quite hide. My voice was quiet, but it was stronger than it had ever been. "I know everything," I told her. And as I spoke, I felt that old, familiar pain start to burn away, replaced by something fierce and unstoppable. Samantha didn't deny it. She just sat there, her lips parting like she might try, but no words came out. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it was mixed with something else too, something cold and unapologetic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was a thunderclap between us, echoing louder than any scream could. My hands were steady on the table, my fingers tracing the edge of the phone like it was the only anchor I had left. Jake walked in then, his eyes going wide when he saw us there together. For a moment, everything stopped. The air seemed to go still, the room shrinking around us. I watched him, waiting for the lies to start, but all he could do was stand there, frozen in the doorway. I met his eyes, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I wanted him to see what he'd done, what they'd both done. There was no more pretending, no more desperate attempts to piece together a broken love. I turned back to Samantha, my voice calm but sharp as I spoke. You thought I was too broken to see the truth, but I see everything now. The weight of those words felt like a release, like setting down a burden I'd carried for far too long. They didn't flinch. They didn't say a word. And in that silence, I realized that sometimes the loudest thing you can do is simply tell the truth. The room was thick with a silence that felt like it might swallow us whole. Samantha looked away first, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her own lies. Jake tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't the one grasping for explanations. I wasn't the one trying to make sense of their choices. I sat there, calm and still, and let the truth hang in the air like smoke. I didn't need to hear their apologies, because I knew they wouldn't mean anything. I didn't need to hear their reasons, the half-baked justifications that might have once kept me awake at night. In that moment, I realized I was done. Done trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. Done searching for pieces that didn't belong to me anymore. I'd spent too long carrying the weight of their secrets. I was ready to lay it down and walk away. The confrontation wasn't about them. It was about me. About standing up for the woman I'd almost lost along the way. And as I stood there, the final pieces of my heart locking into place, I knew I was ready to move on. There was no going back, no turning away from what I'd seen. The next chapter was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into it. The day I left, I didn't take everything, just what I needed, and everything that was rightfully mine. I packed my bags with calm hands, folding the last pieces of the life I'd built with Jake and Samantha into neat stacks. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for them to hold over me. The house felt empty as I walked through it one last time, but I didn't feel small or afraid. I felt light, like I was finally breathing my own air. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them words they'd only twist and turn into excuses. Instead, I walked out the door and left the weight of that place behind me. Every step I took felt like a promise to myself, that I wouldn't let their betrayal define me, that I was more than the girl they thought they could break. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore, nothing but ghosts I no longer had to carry. When I closed the door, I felt a stillness in my chest that I hadn't known in years. No more second-guessing, no more wondering if I was enough. I was done trying to prove myself to people who only ever saw me as an afterthought. I was done holding my breath, done swallowing my words. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, and in that quiet, I found the first real taste of freedom. In the weeks that followed, I didn't let myself sink into the past. I took long walks alone, letting the quiet fill the spaces they used to occupy. I found comfort in the simple things, the way the morning light spilled across my new kitchen, the way laughter felt when it wasn't forced. I reconnected with old friends who reminded me that I was never really alone, and with every shared smile, every honest conversation, I felt the pieces of my heart start to fit back together. It wasn't easy. Some nights, I'd still wake up reaching for a comfort that wasn't there. But even in those moments, I knew I was healing. I didn't need Samantha's sweet words or Jake's empty promises to tell me who I was. I learned to trust my own voice again, to stand in the mirror and see more than the woman they tried to break. I was no longer just surviving. I was beginning to live on my own terms. One afternoon, I found myself laughing over coffee with a friend who had always been there, even when I didn't see it. That laugh felt different, deeper, freer, like it was finally mine. It was in those small, quiet moments that I realized the best kind of revenge wasn't about them at all. It was about choosing my own happiness, my own peace. And every day I chose it, I was reclaiming a little more of the life they tried to steal from me. The day I finally let go of their names, I felt a peace I didn't think was possible. I stopped giving them power over my thoughts, stopped letting their betrayal live rent-free in my mind. It was like setting down a weight I didn't even know I was still carrying. My laughter didn't catch in my throat anymore. My smile didn't feel forced. I wasn't just moving on, I was moving forward, step by step, in a life that was all my own. One evening, as the sun dipped low over my new home, I caught my reflection in the window and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She wasn't broken or small. She wasn't the echo of someone else's lies. She was strong. strong in a way that only comes from surviving the very thing you thought would break you. And in that moment, I realized that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about standing up again, no matter how many times the world tries to push you down. They took my trust, but they couldn't take my spirit. They tried to write me out of my own story, but I'm the one holding the pen now. The final chapter belongs to me, and it's one of laughter, of real friends, of a freedom that tastes sweeter than I ever imagined. And as I walked away from their shadows, I knew one thing for certain. They might have stolen my trust, but they'd never steal my light.